In 1948, British engineers were expanding India's railway network. The Konkan Railway, a 700 kilometers route through the Western Ghats, was a major challenge. Steep cliffs, dense forests, and deep trenches made construction nearly impossible. But British officer Charles Atkinson took it as a challenge. Hundreds of Indian laborers toiled under the sun, breaking rocks with bare hands, whipped if they slowed down. Many accidents occurred: landslides, collapsing tunnels, and workers vanishing. The locals whispered that the land refused to be conquered, but Atkinson ignored the warnings. One day, the laborers reached a specific rocky foothill. The locals panicked. "Sir, this is the home of Nag Devta, the sacred snake god. We must not disturb it." They begged him to move the railway route, but Atkinson laughed. "No, silly, snake god will stop us." The laborers refused to work, speaking of strange hissing sounds at night and shadows moving in the jungle. But Atkinson, growing impatient, forced them to continue. Then, one evening, as he walked near the railway site, he heard something that froze his blood. A thunderous hissing echoed through the hills. Suddenly, from the dark jungle, a gigantic six-headed serpent emerged, its scales gleaming like molten gold, its burning eyes piercing the night. It rose, towering over the site, and spoke inside their minds. "Leave this land. Do not disturb my sleep, or perish." The laborers fell to their knees, praying. Atkinson stood frozen in terror, sweat pouring down his face. The serpent slithered away, but its message was clear. The workers begged him to listen, but his fear turned to anger. Enraged, Atkinson stormed back to his tent. "A trick, a foolish legend. No snake will make a fool of me." That night, he grabbed his double-barrel rifle, ignoring the pleas of the locals, and marched into the jungle to hunt the serpent. Atkinson fired blindly into the darkness, his bullets echoing through the hills. "Come out, you demon. Show yourself." The forest fell silent, too silent. Then, from behind him, came the unmistakable sound of something massive slithering. Atkinson spun around, rifle ready, but saw nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. His breath quickened. His heart pounded. The hissing grew louder. The jungle itself seemed to breathe. Then, the shadows swallowed him whole. The next morning, the laborers waited for Atkinson at the site, but he never came. Confused, a few workers walked to his tent. The tent flapped in the morning wind, eerily still. They called his name. No answer. Something felt wrong. One brave worker stepped inside the tent and immediately froze in terror. Atkinson lay dead on the ground, his eyes wide open, his face twisted in horror. His skin was pale, his veins black, as if his life had been drained from within. The most terrifying sight? From Atkinson's ears, nose, and mouth came a low, continuous hissing sound. Outside his tent, the ground was covered in massive slithering tracks, as if something enormous had crawled over his body during the night. The British officials quickly sealed off the area and called it a mountain accident. But the laborers refused to return. The railway project was halted indefinitely. Fear spread. No one dared to disturb the land again. Eventually, the railway was rerouted, avoiding the forbidden land completely. Even today, that exact stretch of land remains untouched. The locals never go near it, whispering that Nag Devta still sleeps beneath the earth, watching, waiting. Years later, travelers claim to see a shadowy British officer wandering the hills, his eyes frozen in terror, his lips moving as if whispering something, though no words come out. Some say he is still hunted by this six-headed serpent, cursed for his arrogance. If you ever travel through the Western Ghats, listen carefully. If you hear a hissing sound in the wind, do not stop. Do not look back, because the serpent god never forgets, and those who disturb its slumber will never escape.